Welcome to Fuel Your Mind, a web series where we explore all things diesel.
Today we're going to talk about the very lifeblood of your diesel truck, diesel fuel. And we have a couple special guests that will help talk us through the basics of diesel fuel. I would like to welcome now Chris Gabrelchik and Kevin Adams. Kevin?
Hey, how you doing? Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Chris, thank you for being here. Chris is the founder and CEO of Lubrication Specialties, the creator of Hot Shot's Secret. He's been certified by the Society of Tribologists and Lubrication Engineers, and is a certified lubrication specialist, and has been in the field for 30 years?
30 years.
And Kevin is the Vice President of R&D at LSI. Thank you guys so much for being here.
It's our pleasure.
First, can you give me the basics? How is diesel made?
So to start, if we reel it back and say, okay, where does the diesel fuel actually come from? You have to think about the refinery process. Everybody has the idea and understands what crude oil is. I mean, you've seen that on Beverly Hillbillies and that kind of thing. So we're going to start with crude, and they put it into what's basically a pressure cooker. They add some water to it and heat the pressure up. And as the pressures hit different levels, different things will start to settle out. So if you can imagine in the refinery, just like in the pressure cooker, the heavy things are going to be on the bottom, and then there's going to be medium grade things, and then the real light grades on top. So if you're visualizing this at the top, you're going to have like naphtha, gasoline, then kerosene and diesel. See how we're getting heavier? Then we got motor oil, number 4 oil, number 6 oil. Then at the bottom is asphalt. So believe it or not, asphalt actually comes from the same crude oil as the diesel fuel does. So once we get that diesel fuel out, they cool it down and put it in tanks and use it for trucks and everything that runs off of the diesel.
So diesel is really just oil that has been cooked in a pressure cooker.
Correct. It's a part of that crude oil, just like the gasoline is and the naphtha. So those things are all part of the crude oil, and we're just extracting different pieces based on the pressure and the temperatures.
So how exactly is diesel different than gasoline?
So diesel fuel is going to have more BTUs in it, which just means that it's got more explosive power than gasoline. The gasoline burns faster and cleaner, really. The fumes on a gasoline will burn. That's why there's a spark in a gasoline engine or a spark plug. On diesel fuel, we call compression diesel, because what's happening is we're smashing all the molecules and they explode. So more power with diesel fuel, and it doesn't burn nearly as easily as gasoline does. So for instance, if you had a bowl of gasoline and a bowl of diesel fuel, you threw a match in the gasoline, it would light up. If you threw a match in the diesel fuel, it would just pretty much go out.
So when I go to the gas pump and I fill up and I see the octane level, how does that translate to diesel?
Okay, so on gasoline, we're gonna have the octane rating, and on diesel fuel will be cetane rating. The difference is that they're just opposite of each other. Octane, we want to retard the explosion to the moment when the spark plug ignites. So we want all those molecules to explode at exactly the right time. And if your octane level is too low, some of those guys will start to explode ahead of time, and that gives you a knock in the engine. That's why you have to have a minimum octane of 87. You start going down, you start getting knocking, which eventually could ruin the engine. On diesel fuel, we have the opposite. We want it to explode at the perfect moment with all it's got, and we want to increase that time by increasing the cetane. So on the cetane level, what we're using to increase that would be ethyl hexyl nitrate, which is the same thing they make dynamite out of, just to give you an idea.
Yeah.
We're looking for explosion. We want this, as clean and good of an explosion as we can possibly get inside that combustion chamber.
Most of us have at least heard of cetane and its gas alternative, octane. But what actually is cetane? And what does a cetane rating signify at the pump? Cetane is the measure of combustibility in diesel fuel. To understand what cetane does, let's quickly review how an injector works. Fuel is sprayed from the injector into the combustion chamber where it combusts, forcing the piston down. The quality of the spray is important. The smaller and more spread out the droplets of fuel, the more complete combustion is able to be achieved. Cetane rating affects how efficiently the fuel will burn when it is sprayed. Cetane is rated on a scale of 0 to 100. A rating of 100 is given to pure cetane. The ASTM minimum standard cetane number for ULSD is 40. Most diesel vehicles run best on fuel that is a cetane number between 45 and 55. The rating at the pump is not an accurate rating of the fuel you're putting into your engine. It's only a guarantee of the minimum. When the cetane number is increased, each of those droplets has a higher chance of combusting. The higher a cetane rating, the more complete burn is able to be achieved, allowing you to get more bang out of your fuel. Low cetane can be the cause of many problems in an engine, including lowered fuel economy, lowered power, and increased emissions. When unburnt fuel is left in the combustion chamber, it will continue through the system and be seen as white smoke and other particles. This increases the emissions that your truck puts off. For an easy cetane boost, try Diesel Extreme or Everyday Diesel Treatment. For a winter option, try Diesel Winter Anti-Gel. So why does the United States have diesel fuel with such low lubricity?
Yeah, that's a good question. Basically, it started back in the 90s when they started reducing the sulfur level in diesel fuel. So in the early 90s, it went from 5,000 down to 500 parts per million. And then early 2000s, around 2006, ultra low sulfur diesel fuel was introduced. And basically, as the sulfur level comes down in diesel fuel, so does the lubricity and the stability of the diesel fuel.
I think I heard something about that or read something about a lawsuit that's going on right now.
So today there's a lawsuit between, it's a class action lawsuit against General Motors because the fuel pumps don't have enough lubricity and they're shredding apart, causing catastrophic failure. Little shards of metal are going in because there's a lack of lubricity. Yeah. And that's due to the sulfur content not being there.
Originally, diesel fuel naturally had all the lubricating properties that were needed to keep an engine safe. In fact, until ULSD, there was not even a standard for diesel lubricity. As the EPA began making regulations for removing the sulfur, it was discovered that the process by which the sulfur is removed also removes the lubricating elements of the fuel, namely oxygen and nitrogen. Once problems with the lubricity became obvious, the American Society for Testing Materials realized that they needed to add lubricity to their overall standard for diesel fuel, which is the ASTM D975 specification. The standard for lubricity is a 520 micron wear scar for US diesel fuel. For a deeper discussion on that, see our video on ultra-low sulfur diesel. Luckily, we now know the importance of making sure ULSD fuel has the appropriate amount of lubrication added and what problems occur when it's not. The areas of an engine that often suffer from fuel with poor lubricity are the injectors and the fuel pumps. Any places in the fuel system that have tight clearances are going to suffer the most from under-lubricated fuel. When low-quality fuel is run through your engine, the effects are often not easy to spot until major damage has already occurred, unless, of course, you take the whole fuel system apart and examine each piece. By examining the inside of your fuel system, you will be able to see the signs of wear and friction that are characteristic of lacking lubricity. If your engine is run too long on poor quality fuel, the wear damage will lead to serious and expensive problems, including damaged engine parts. If you're worried about the quality of your fuel or the shape of your engine, check out our LX4 or EDT, which adds all the lubricity that was taken out by the desulfurization process without adding back the sulfur. So do other countries have the same problems with their diesel?
It is a universal problem around the world, and there is something unique to US diesel fuel, though, that makes the kind of compounds a problem. So for example, overseas, using a wear scar as the index of how much lubricity is in the fuel, in Europe, the wear scar is 460. So a wear scar is the maximum amount of damage that could be done to the surface. That volume would be 460. In the United States, it's 520. So our spec is, basically 30-40% higher. We allow more damage to that scar area in the category of lubricity. So that's where the big difference is.
So there's specific testing for this. It's called an HFRR, high frequency reciprocating rig. And that's a ASTM test, and all the diesel fuels will go through that. So when they put this test together, or when they put the spec together in the United States, they didn't specify that you had to have that better level of lubricity, which is creating problems because a lot of the equipment that we buy today is engineered and made overseas. So when it comes here, it doesn't really work with our fuel. And that's what we try to design areas to fix that. That's one of the problems that we fix.
So when the governmental regulations pulled the sulfur out of the diesel, were there any other issues that came up after that?
Yeah, actually, we brought some samples today to kind of show you. This first one is an example of bacteria growth.
So what we're talking about is bacterial growth. They're microbes that grow. They live off of hydrocarbons, but they need moisture to be present. With ultra-low sulfur fuel came more moisture in the fuel, which allowed for more microbial growth. So it's just a problem that's more common today than it used to be.
When you hear people talk about the diesel bug, they're referring to microbes. The term microbes includes the bacteria, molds, and fungi that feed off of the diesel fuel. This feeding causes the diesel to corrode with the same effects as we talked about in another episode. Microbes emit acid as a byproduct, causing an even greater increase in oxidation and corrosion. As we have said throughout this series, this problem wasn't so bad until sulfur was removed from diesel fuel. Sulfur made diesel a less friendly environment for microbes. Microbes grow in the water that condenses at the top and sits at the bottom of your tank. They create their own environment of slimy film in this water where it can grow to cover the tank. This film not only plugs filters from pieces that break off, but it also provides a protective environment for the microbes to live in. This makes it complicated to treat with biocides. The best protection against microbes is prevention. Keep your diesel clear of water by treating it with a good water dispersant. We recommend a demulsifier to prevent microbes from colonizing your engine. For a high-performing demulsifier, check out our Diesel Extreme. Treatment with biocides becomes complicated when a film is formed. If the microbes have formed a film in your fuel tank, your filters will need to be checked often during the process of treating the microbes. If you already have microbes present in your fuel system, you should treat with a biocide and a water dispersant. If the infection is too severe, your fuel system will need to be professionally cleaned.
The other problem that we have is moisture. Because there is more water in it, and it does seem to be able to absorb more water, we see a lot more water present in today's diesel fuel than there used to be before the sulfur was taken out.
A huge problem for diesel owners is water in fuel, which is very bad for your diesel fuel and your engine. Unfortunately, it's almost inevitable that some water will get into your fuel. There are two ways in which water can exist in your fuel. Either emulsified water that is dispersed or in suspension, or water which has fallen to the bottom of the tank because it is heavier than the diesel. Most trucks are equipped with a fuel water separator that keeps water from entering your engine. It does this with a filtering material that water cannot pass through, but through which fuel can. Fuel passes through the fuel water separator to the rest of the engine, while water is collected at the bottom of the separator and can be drained out. Water in fuel can cause a long list of problems. Water causes metal to rust. Rusting metal parts in your engine is a problem in and of itself, but we will talk about that in another episode. In the cold weather, water presents the very dangerous problem of freezing, which can burst lines and other parts. Speaking of bursting, if water gets to your injectors, it can blow the tips right off of them. So, how does water make its way into your fuel? Unfortunately, diesel is hygroscopic, meaning it readily absorbs water. It also does not have a vapor pressure, and so moisture-rich air can enter where diesel is being stored and condense into droplets on the inside for the fuel to absorb. There are two types of additives for removing water from fuel: emulsifiers and demulsifiers. Emulsifiers keep water in suspension so that it doesn't fall to the bottom. Demulsifiers force the water out of suspension so that it drops to the bottom and can be filtered out by the fuel water separator. We believe that the safest water dispersant additive is a demulsifier to help your truck's fuel water separator do a better job instead of emulsifying and sending the water through your fuel system. For an effective demulsifier, check out our Diesel Extreme or EDT, or Diesel Winter Anti-Gel if you're looking for a cold weather option.
Yeah, and then this last one is asphaltenes. Basically asphaltenes and biodiesel components have more of a tendency now to come out of solution because of the absence of the sulfur compounds. Sulfur acted to stabilize it and reduce oxidation. So what some of our customers see is fuel filters plugging up more often because of the occurrence of asphaltenes.
So Bram, when they took the sulfur out, it wasn't just removing the lubricity. It was also removing antioxidants and a stabilizing factor. The sulfur acts as a stabilizer for other additives and things that went in there. So now as those drop out, that creates problems across the board, as well as with the moisture and the microbes.
Diesel fuel begins to degrade as soon as it leaves the refinery, and ULSD makes this situation much worse. Before ULSD, fuel could last up to several years in storage. Today, the general recommendation from manufacturers is not to store ULSD more than 1 year, and not to store biodiesel blends longer than 6 months. In fact, fuel kept in poor conditions can break down in as little as 30 days. Clean, stable diesel is clear in appearance, like that right there. When it goes bad, it will start to appear dark, dirty, and cloudy. It can also appear sludgy or have particles in it. Fundamentally, bad fuel is chemically unstable. There are factors that speed up this destabilization process, including heat, oxygen, water, and certain metals. Heavy hydrocarbon particles, known as asphaltenes, tend to fall out of solution. As fuel becomes more unstable, more asphaltenes come out of the solution and gather together, darkening the fuel and eventually becoming solids, heavy enough to drop to the bottom of the tank. When fuel degrades, it also creates acids. If you run bad fuel through your engine, the first sign is usually plugged filters because of the particulate matter present. If you continue to run bad fuel through your engine, it can experience a loss of pressure, which in extreme cases leads to engine failure. Incomplete combustion can also be caused by bad fuel, which may be visible as black smoke. Fuel degradation can occur in an engine or in a storage tank. Storage tanks must be kept clean in order to keep the fuel stable. If they're not kept well, many issues can occur, with possibly the worst being water accumulation leading to microbes. Thankfully, we have a solution to destabilized fuel stabilizers. A fuel stabilizer works by blocking the reaction of chemical breakdown of the fuel. An important note is that fuel stabilizers cannot restabilize degraded fuel. Since unstable fuel causes all kinds of problems and can occur in a short amount of time, it is important to use a fuel stabilizer if you're storing fuel for any amount of time. This includes extended periods when you are not running an engine, say over the summer. For a good fuel stabilizer, check out our EDT. Those are great examples. Thank you so much. I mean, there's so much. Is there anything else that a diesel truck owner has to worry about with diesel compared to gasoline?
Yeah, one of the things about diesel fuel is it has wax in it. And in warm climates, it doesn't matter. But if you're in a cold climate, you have to treat your fuel to keep it from what we call gelling. So they're called anti-gels. When you don't treat the fuel, what will happen is the wax will start to separate and coagulate and then block the filter. So anybody in a cold climate has to use what's called an anti-gel.
Let's begin by talking about paraffin waxes. These waxes are naturally occurring in your diesel fuel. They are combustible and help out by adding power. In cold weather, the waxes will change in structure and begin coming together and forming crystals. These crystals clump together, plugging filters, and they can eventually gel up your entire fuel system. There are two terms that are important to know associated with wax content: cloud point and cold filter plug point. Cloud point is the point at which the temperature is low enough for wax crystals to become visible, making the fuel look cloudy. The cold filter plug point is the point at which the temperature is low enough to completely plug filters. This occurs when the wax crystals reach a large enough size that they cannot pass through the filtering material, and so they plug it up. This can cause your engine to stop running. The filter plug point is not only affected by the behavior of the wax content. Any water present in the diesel is susceptible to freezing, which will plug filters and prevent diesel from being able to flow. Another problem with freezing is burst lines. Since water expands upon freezing, it can burst lines inside your engine, as well as cause pits in the metal parts. Just like potholes, any little crack that water gets into and freezes will create a bigger crack. There are 3 main cold weather diesel additives that can help prevent these cold weather problems from occurring in your vehicle. They are wax modifiers, wax anti-settling agents, and de-icers. Wax modifiers chemically inhibit wax crystals from reaching a large size. By keeping the crystals small, you can greatly reduce the cold filter plug point and keep the fuel from gelling up completely. Wax anti-settling agents work by keeping the wax crystals in suspension. Keeping the crystals in suspension keeps them from gathering and clumping together. Even though crystal size stays small, without an anti-settling agent, the crystals can clump together, causing them to block filters even at those small sizes. Finally, a de-icer prevents the water in the tank from freezing, which can prevent lines from bursting and pitting from occurring. It also helps prevent gelling by keeping the water from icing up in the fuel. We're going to be talking about IDIDs and why they became such an issue for diesel drivers. Diesel engines have become much cleaner and more efficient than when they were invented way back at the end of the 19th century. Diesel fuel has also become more refined than it was originally. So why have IDIDs become a problem recently? Well, an internal diesel injector deposit, also known as an IDID, is a deposit or buildup that specifically occurs on the inside of your diesel injector. These deposits interfere with the spray pattern of the injector, causing a loss of engine power. They can also form in a way which causes the injector to stick, letting unatomized fuel leak into the combustion chamber. As injector technology progressed, the clearance in the injector became tighter, allowing deposits to cause bigger and bigger problems. And with the development of ULSD, many compounds became non-soluble due to the lack of sulfur, including the compounds that form IDIDs. For a closer look at the chemical formation of IDIDs, just click here and check out our Science Corner, where we talk about the compounds that lead to IDIDs and how they get into your fuel. For those of you that don't know, most fuel that you get from the pump already has additives in it. While there are no government requirements for additives in diesel like there are for gasoline, diesel fuel is required to meet the ASTM D975 standard. Since diesel is prone to problems, additives are often needed to meet this standard. An important component of any diesel additive package is the detergent. Since diesel tends to form deposits and gunk up an engine, the role of a detergent is to reduce fouling, or in other words, clean the engine. Detergents do this by chemically breaking down the gunky residue inside of the engine. For more in-depth discussion on the chemical process of this, please check out our Science Corner. By removing deposits in the combustion chamber and from the injector, fuel efficiency is increased as the combustion process is able to maintain peak performance. Detergents also help reduce emissions by removing the dirty particles from being burned off into the exhaust. For a detergent that is safe for your engine and provides full benefits, check out our Diesel Extreme and our Everyday Diesel Treatment. In order to understand how to prevent corrosion, we have to know how it occurs. In chemistry, corrosion is defined as the process of a refined metal returning to its natural oxidation state. For those of us who aren't chemists, this means that metal, well, rusts. In fact, rust is actually just the name given specifically to the corrosion of iron and steel. To break it down simply, this is what corrosion looks like written out as a chemical process. Water comes into contact with the metal surface, and due to the electrical charge of the water, part of the metal goes into the water, leaving behind a charged electron. This electron migrates over to contact the oxygen outside of the water because of its electrical charge and forms a new substance. This substance then reacts with the part of the metal that left originally and combines to form what we call rust. When this process occurs inside the fuel system of your engine, it causes a number of problems. One of the most visible problems is rusting through parts. Fuel tanks, lines, pumps, and any other metal part is at risk of rusting. Rust particles break off from the surface and can clog filters, resulting in low power and inefficient combustion. In order to protect metal parts from rusting, a barrier must be formed between the metal surface and the water and oxygen to stop the chemical reaction from taking place. This barrier has to also be chemically attracted to the metal surface. Otherwise, the substance will be left floating around inside your fuel. Whatever material is used as the corrosion inhibitor additive, it has to be safe for your fuel and not cause any other problems in your engine. Preventing against rust and corrosion is the best step to take and the most inexpensive. For a safe and reliable corrosion inhibitor, check out our EDT. Well, that is it for today. If you have any questions, please send us an email at video@hotshotsecret.com. And as always, if you like this video, please give us a thumbs up so we know to keep making them for you. Thank you, and we'll see you next time on Fuel Your Mind.